When you think about cyberspace, what comes to mind? Probably servers, endless cables, lines of code, right? A network of machines that we built. But what if that's the wrong way to look at it? A really fascinating research paper argues that instead of a network, we should be seeing cyberspace as something else.
So that brings us to the big question this research wants us to ask. Is cyberspace really just a network of machines? Or is it something a whole lot wilder, more alive, kind of like a digital jungle?
All right, let's really get into this. The core idea here is that cyberspace isn't just some static system we engineered. The thing is, it acts a lot more like a living ecosystem. A place that can interact with itself, self-organize, and even evolve and adapt all on its own.
And if you start looking at it that way, a lot of the chaos online starts to make sense. In this digital jungle, you have all these different species. I'm talking hackers, security firms, governments, yeah, even us. And we're all competing for resources, constantly changing our tactics, and just fighting to survive in this world of nonstop conflict.
Okay, so what's all the fighting for? What's the prize? Well, at its heart, just like in any other ecosystem, it's a constant, grinding fight for control over valuable resources.
It all boils down to something super simple. Every single resource out there in cyberspace, we're talking money, information, critical infrastructure, even people, has weaknesses. You can think of them like cracks in the armor, the little entry points that let someone else get access and take control.
And this, right here, sets up the two big players in our jungle. On one side, you've got the defenders. They spend all their time and money trying to figure out where those cracks are and patch them up. And on the other side, you've got the attackers, who are pouring their resources into finding and exploiting those exact same weaknesses. It's a textbook arms race.
So in this digital jungle, that's what cyber warfare really is. It's just this continuous arms race between competing groups, all scrambling for control over resources. It's not just about code and keyboards, it's really all about power.
But here's where it gets really interesting and kind of turns everything on its head. See, the roles of attacker and defender, they aren't set in stone. Not at all. In this digital jungle, the hunter can become the hunted in the blink of an eye.
And this is the absolute core insight of the research. Get this. When an attacker actually succeeds and grabs a resource, the original defender doesn't just pack up and go home. To get back what was stolen from them, they're forced to go on the offensive. They have to become an attacker themselves. And it's this constant flipping of roles that keeps the digital jungle in this permanent state of conflict.
Look, this isn't just some abstract idea on a whiteboard. This dynamic plays out in the real world all the time. Let's take a look at a really famous example that you probably remember, the 2021 Colonial Pipeline attack.
So on May 7th, the hacker group DarkSide was the clear attacker. They locked up Colonial Pipeline's network. Colonial, as the defender, paid a huge ransom, $4.4 million in Bitcoin. But the story doesn't stop there. Colonial then called the FBI, and boom, right there, the tables turned completely. The FBI, acting for the defender, became the new attacker, and their target was DarkSide's resources. And their attack worked. They managed to seize the Bitcoin wallet and get a lot of that ransom back, turning the original attacker, DarkSide, into the new defender of their stolen cash.
So you see this back and forth? It's not just chaos. The researchers discovered that this whole cycle is actually a predictable pattern. So predictable, in fact, that you can describe it using mathematical models that are borrowed straight from the world of ecology.
You've probably heard of the classic predator-prey model in biology, right? More wolves means fewer rabbits, which means the wolves starve and their numbers go down, which lets the rabbit population bounce back. It's an endless cycle. Well, the wild part is that cyber warfare seems to follow almost the exact same pattern. You have attackers hunting defenders for resources, which creates this very similar oscillating wave of conflict.
So, to build their model, the researchers came up with three main digital species. First, you've got the uninterested. That's most of us, just trying to live our lives online. Then you have the defense, the ones who are actively protecting resources. And finally, you have the offense, the ones trying to take those resources.
What this model shows us is how everyone moves around in this ecosystem. People from that big uninterested pool can get recruited to join either the offense or the defense. But the really crucial part is that members of the offense and defense can also convert, flowing back and forth between those roles as the fight for resources just keeps on going. So the million-dollar question is, what does this model actually predict for the future? What happens when you just let this digital ecosystem run its course over time?
Well, the simulation spits out something that's, well, it's both fascinating and a little bit unsettling.
After this initial phase where the uninterested people get pulled into the fight, the whole system settles. But it doesn't settle into peace. It settles into a stable but constantly fluctuating state of conflict. The populations of offense and defense just rise and fall in this never-ending dance, an oscillating arms race where nobody ever really wins.
Okay, so what does this all mean for us, for the future? The implications of looking at the world this way, they're actually pretty profound.
The mathematical analysis in the paper boils it all down to one really stark conclusion. The only truly stable state for this whole ecosystem, the only point where the conflict actually stops for good, is a state where every single person is uninterested. A world with no attackers, but also no defenders.
And that is the big punchline here. As long as there is anything of value in the digital jungle, money, data, power, a state of total, lasting peace is, mathematically speaking, pretty much impossible. Conflict isn't a bug we can just patch and fix. It's a fundamental, built-in feature of the entire ecosystem.
And that leaves us with a pretty tough question to chew on, doesn't it? If this constant conflict is a feature, not a bug, then maybe the goal shouldn't be to win the war, because you can't. Maybe the goal has to be just to endure it. So how do we design our systems, our policies, our entire society to be truly resilient in a world where the digital jungle is here to stay?